The smell of sizzling burgers filled the air, mingling with the soft hum of laughter and conversation. It was a perfect Saturday afternoon in Maplewood Heights, the type of day that made Marcus Johnson glad he and his family had moved to this leafy suburban neighborhood. Children's laughter rang out from the backyard as his son, Aiden, chased after his cousins, while his wife, Elena, laid out a colorful spread on the picnic table.
But not everyone shared Marcus's contentment. From her window, Karen Thompson scowled as she watched the scene unfold next door. She had lived in Maplewood Heights for over 20 years, and she prided herself on knowing her neighbors, at least the ones she approved of. The Johnsons, though, a wealthy black family with high-profile careers, they weren't like the others. Karen's disapproving gaze flicked from the kids running through the yard to Marcus, who stood at the grill with an easy smile, laughing with his brother David. Karen shook her head. Too loud. Too many people. Too much trouble. Unbelievable, she muttered under her breath, retreating further into the shadows of her living room. The sound of their laughter grated on her nerves, a painful reminder that times were changing, whether she liked it or not. Outside, Marcus flipped a burger with a grin as David cracked a joke about their mother's famous barbecue recipe. Everything felt perfect, until a voice shattered the peaceful vibe. "Excuse me, Mr. Johnson!" Marcus looked up to see Karen standing at the fence, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, lips pursed in a tight line. Her expression was a mixture of annoyance and condescension, the kind he'd seen many times before. Elena noticed too, exchanging a wary glance with Marcus as she continued setting the table. "Hey there, Karen," Marcus called out, keeping his voice friendly. He already knew what was coming. "Can we help you with something?" Karen didn't move closer. "I hope you're planning on keeping things under control. I'd hate for the neighborhood to get the wrong impression about certain people causing a ruckus." The unspoken meaning behind her words hung thick in the air. Marcus's smile faltered just slightly, but he refused to let her spoil the day. Not again. "Don't worry," he replied smoothly. "We're just having a family BBQ, nothing too crazy." Karen's eyes narrowed, lingering on the group of guests, all black, all smiling, chatting, and simply enjoying the day. "Just keep it quiet," she said with an air of finality, turning on her heel and heading back inside without another word. Marcus's fingers tightened around the spatula. "Always something, isn't it?" he muttered. David chuckled under his breath. "Seems like your neighbor's got a problem with more than just the noise." "Yeah, well, she's not going to ruin this day for us," Marcus said, but his shoulders were tense now, the carefree feeling starting to slip away. He shook it off, determined to keep things light. The day wasn't about Karen, it was about family. But inside her house, Karen's irritation festered into something uglier. Every peal of laughter from the Johnsons' yard felt like an insult, a disruption of the order she had worked so hard to maintain in the neighborhood. She paced back and forth, casting furtive glances out the window. "Who do they think they are?" she fumed, gripping her phone in her hand. She hadn't wanted them here from the start. It didn't matter that they could afford the house, or that Marcus was some big-shot judge. To her, they didn't belong. And today, they were proving it with that loud party and their questionable guests. She couldn't take it anymore. With a surge of self-righteous determination, Karen dialed 911. "There's a disturbance at my neighbor's house," she said, her voice a mix of concern and indignation. "There's a large group of people outside making a lot of noise, and I'm worried. It just doesn't feel safe." Marcus had just plated another set of burgers when he noticed the squad car pull up in front of his house. His smile faded, and the jovial chatter around him quieted. Elena, standing nearby, went still, her eyes darting toward the front yard, where two police officers stepped out of their vehicle. The sudden tension was palpable, like a storm cloud settling over the gathering. "What's going on?" one of the guests murmured. Marcus handed the spatula to David and wiped his hands on a towel before heading toward the officers. His heart thudded a little faster, though he kept his face neutral. Elena followed a few steps behind, her protective instincts kicking in as she placed a hand on Aiden's shoulder. "Afternoon, officers," Marcus said as he approached, his voice calm but laced with quiet authority. "Is there a problem?" The taller of the two officers, a man with a thick beard, glanced around the yard before speaking. "We got a call about a noise complaint and possible disturbance in the area. Can you tell us what's going on here?" Marcus's jaw clenched, though he kept his tone measured. He gestured to the backyard. "It's a family barbecue, just enjoying the weekend with friends." The other officer, a woman with a no-nonsense expression, stepped forward. "We're going to need to see some identification just to verify everything's in order." Marcus's eyes flickered with frustration, but he held his ground. "Are we really doing this? In front of my kids? You can see there's nothing illegal going on here." The male officer's gaze was hard to read, but he didn't back down. "Just following up on a call, sir." From the corner of his eye, Marcus spotted Karen standing on her porch, arms crossed as she watched the scene unfold. Her eyes gleamed with satisfaction, as if she had been waiting for this moment. Elena stepped up beside Marcus, her voice cutting through the thick tension. "Why are we the ones being questioned? I don't see you asking our neighbor for ID." The female officer's expression tightened. "We're responding to a report, ma'am." "A false report," Elena shot back. "It's clear what's going on here." Marcus took a deep breath, pulling out his wallet. "Fine, here's my ID." He handed it over, the name Marcus Johnson prominently displayed. The officers glanced at it, and the male officer's eyes widened slightly as he read the name. His posture stiffened. "Judge Marcus Johnson?" the officer asked, his tone suddenly deferential. "That's right," Marcus replied, his voice steady but firm. "And I don't appreciate being treated like a suspect in my own home." A ripple of realization passed between the officers. The tension in their stances softened, replaced by unease. We didn't know, Your Honor. We were just responding to the call," the male officer stammered, clearly backpedaling now. Marcus folded his arms, his gaze steady and unwavering. "And now that you do know, maybe you can think about why you were called here in the first place." Behind them, Karen's expression shifted from smug satisfaction to confusion and then fear as she overheard the conversation. She took a tentative step forward, still clutching the edge of her porch railing. "What's the problem here?" Karen called out, her voice louder than necessary, as if trying to regain control of the situation. "I was just concerned about the noise, that's all." Marcus turned slowly, his eyes locking on Karen's. His voice was quiet but carried the weight of authority. "The problem is, Karen, you called the police on us because you didn't like what you saw. You didn't care about the noise. You cared about the fact that we're black, and in your mind, that makes us dangerous." Karen's face flushed red, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find a defense. "I didn't mean it like that. You just what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp now. "Felt uncomfortable seeing a group of black people having a good time, so you weaponized the police because you thought it would put us in our place?" The officers stood awkwardly by, clearly wanting to extricate themselves from the situation, but unable to move. Elena stepped forward, her eyes burning with anger. "You could have put our family at risk today. Do you even understand that? This could have gone so much worse, all because you felt, what? Threatened? Inconvenienced?" Karen's face paled, and for the first time, she looked genuinely shaken. I just thought—" "You thought wrong," Marcus said coldly. "And now, you've shown everyone exactly who you are." As the officers hastily apologized and retreated to their vehicle, the guests slowly began to relax again, though the mood was now tinged with unease. Marcus and Elena stood at the edge of their yard, watching Karen retreat back into her house, her figure small and defeated. Aiden tugged on his father's sleeve, his young eyes filled with questions. "Dad, why did the police come? We weren't doing anything wrong." Marcus knelt down to his son's level, his voice soft but serious. "No, we weren't, Aiden. But sometimes people make bad decisions because they don't understand others who are different from them. What's important is that we always stand up for what's right, even when it's hard." Aiden's brow furrowed as he absorbed his father's words, sensing the gravity of the situation. "But we're good people. Why don't they understand?" Marcus sighed, his heart heavy. He wished he could shield his son from the harsh realities of the world for a little longer, but he knew that was impossible. Some people are afraid of what they don't know. They judge people based on how they look, instead of who they are. It's wrong, and it's not fair, but it's something we'll always have to face. What matters is how we respond. Elena knelt beside them, resting a comforting hand on Aiden's back. And today, we responded by showing strength and dignity. We didn't let fear or anger control us, and that's what makes us powerful. Aiden nodded slowly, though the confusion hadn't fully left his eyes. But what if it happens again? Marcus exchanged a glance with Elena, their silent communication revealing a shared understanding. They couldn't promise it wouldn't happen again, but they could prepare their children to face the world with courage and confidence. "If it happens again, we'll handle it, just like we did today," Marcus said gently. "And you'll know that no matter what anyone says or does, you have every right to be proud of who you are." Maya, who had been listening from the side, stepped forward and slipped her small hand into her father's. "I don't like her," she whispered, glancing toward Karen's house. Marcus smiled softly at his daughter. "You don't have to like her, sweetie. But what's important is that you don't let people like that change how you feel about yourself. We're better than that." Maya's lips curved into a small smile as she leaned into Marcus's side. "Okay, Dad." As the afternoon wore on, the guests slowly began to relax again, though the incident with the police lingered in the background like a shadow. Conversations resumed, but the laughter was more subdued. The children returned to their games, though they seemed more aware of the tension in the air. Marcus found himself standing at the grill again, staring at the flames, lost in thought. He had faced situations like this before, too many to count, but it was different when it happened in front of his children, in the home he had worked so hard to build for them. He had always known that success wouldn't shield his family from prejudice, but it stung every time they were reminded of it. Elena came up beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "You okay?" she asked softly, her eyes searching his face. He nodded, though his expression was still tight. "Yeah, just thinking about the kids. They're so young, and they're already starting to see how the world can be." Elena sighed, leaning her head against his shoulder. "I know. It's hard to watch. But they're strong, Marcus. And they have us." Marcus smiled at that, feeling a sense of pride swell in his chest. He and Elena had worked hard to instill confidence and resilience in their children, knowing they would need those traits in a world that wasn't always kind. "You're right. They'll be okay." "They'll be more than okay," Elena said, her voice firm. "They'll grow up knowing they can face anything." Later that evening, after the last of the guests had left and the house had grown quiet, Marcus stood out on the back porch, gazing up at the stars. The crisp night air felt like a balm on his skin, soothing the lingering tension from the day. As he stood there, he heard the soft sound of a door creaking open. Turning, he saw Karen stepping out onto her porch next door, her figure small and hesitant in the dim light. For a moment, they stood there in silence, the distance between them feeling both vast and impossibly close. Karen shifted awkwardly, her hands wringing together. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and tentative. I wanted to say I'm sorry. About earlier. Marcus didn't reply right away, letting her words hang in the air. He could sense the discomfort radiating off her, and part of him wondered if she was truly sorry or if she was just trying to smooth things over now that she knew who he was. I shouldn't have called the police, Karen continued, her voice shaky. I wasn't thinking straight. I was worried about things getting out of control. Marcus turned to face her fully, his expression unreadable. Things weren't out of control, Karen. We were just having a family barbecue. I know, she said quickly, her face pale in the faint glow of her porch light. I was wrong. I see that now. There was a long pause as Marcus considered her words. He could see the fear in her eyes, the fear of being called out for what she had done, the fear of being labeled a racist. But was she truly remorseful, or was this just another attempt to save face? After a moment, Marcus spoke, his voice calm but firm. What you did today could have gone very badly, Karen. You put my family at risk because of your assumptions, and that's not something I can easily forget. Karen's eyes filled with tears and she wiped at them quickly, embarrassed. I didn't mean to hurt anyone. I was just afraid, Marcus finished for her. You were afraid of something you didn't understand, but that doesn't excuse what you did. Karen nodded, her shoulders slumping. You're right. I was wrong. I'll do better. Marcus regarded her for a long moment before giving a small nod. I hope you do, Karen, because this kind of thing can't keep happening. With that, he turned and walked back into his house, leaving Karen standing on her porch, alone with her guilt. Inside, Marcus found Elena sitting on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked up as he entered, her expression curious. Was that Karen I heard outside? Marcus nodded, sinking down beside her. She apologized. Elena raised an eyebrow. Did she now? Yeah, said she was worried and didn't think it through. Elena scoffed softly, shaking her head. Worried about what? A family enjoying themselves? That's what I said, Marcus replied, rubbing a hand over his face. I think she's starting to realize how wrong she was, but who knows if it'll stick. Elena took a sip of her wine, her eyes thoughtful. Maybe it will. Maybe it won't. Either way, we can't control her. We can only control how we respond. Marcus leaned back, letting out a long breath. You're right. And today, we showed our kids how to respond with strength. Elena smiled softly, leaning into him. That's what matters. They'll remember that. As they sat there together, the house quiet and peaceful around them, Marcus felt a deep sense of pride, not just in himself, but in his family. They had faced another challenge today, one of many they would encounter, but they had stood tall, united in their strength and love. And that, more than anything, was what made them powerful.